The cabin lights dimmed as Flight 482 from Chicago began its descent into Denver. Captain Jack Monroe, calm and composed in the cockpit, guided the Boeing 737 with a practiced hand. At 52, he had logged more hours in the sky than he could count. Every switch, every button, every checklist was second nature by now. More muscle memory than thought. "Flaps 30, he said, and his co-pilot Maria Reyes responded in kind. Jack glanced out the cockpit window. The Rockies stood proud in the distance, their snow-dusted peaks catching the last light of day. It was a beautiful view, but one Jack had seen countless times. What made this flight different was the feeling in his gut, an unease that had nothing to do with turbulence. There'd been rumors, whispers in hangars and crew lounges. Ever since Carter Sloan had taken over as CEO of Altair Airways 6 months ago, things had changed, and not for the better. Veteran staff were being reassigned, safety protocols were being streamlined, and even simple things like break-room coffee had become non-essential budget items. But Jack didn't care about the coffee. He cared about his crew. Landing was smooth, textbook even. Passengers clapped as they often did, though Jack never quite understood why. It wasn't about applause. For him, flying had always been about precision, discipline, and the quiet satisfaction of getting people safely from point A to point B. Back at the gate, Jack stood by the cockpit door, thanking passengers as they disembarked. "You're the reason I still fly Altair," said a silver-haired man as he exited. "Smoothest landing I've had in years." Jack smiled and nodded, but his eyes shifted. On the tarmac stood a man in a Navy suit, arms crossed. Carter Sloan, not one to wait for a meeting request, it seemed. When Jack reached the crew area, Sloan stepped forward with a tight smile. "Captain Monroe, a moment." Jack motioned for Maria to go ahead without him. "Sure, Mr. Sloan." Sloan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Walk with me." They didn't talk much as they moved through the terminal, past passengers snapping selfies and toddlers clinging to parents. Sloan finally stopped in front of a closed conference room and opened the door. Inside sat 2 HR reps and a thin man in a legal suit. Jack's stomach dropped. "Is there a problem?" he asked, voice firm. Sloan nodded to the HR manager, who handed Jack a folder. "We appreciate your 15 years of service, Captain Monroe," she began. "But effective immediately, your position is being terminated as part of a strategic restructuring of Altair Airways flight operations." Jack's hands tightened on the folder. "Excuse me?" "You'll receive severance equivalent to 6 months of pay, contingent on a non-disparagement agreement. We'll need your badge and credentials." He stared at them, stunned. 15 years gone. No warning, no incident. Just a suit and a spreadsheet. Sloan finally spoke. "It's not personal, Jack. It's business. The industry is changing." Jack stepped closer, looking him in the eye. "No, it's cowardice. You don't know this airline. You don't know what it takes to run it. And you sure as hell don't know what it means to lead." Sloan didn't flinch. "That's where we differ." Jack left the room without another word, handing over his badge. Outside, the sun had set. All he had now was a flight bag, a folder, and a reputation that suddenly wasn't enough. But as he walked toward the parking lot, something hardened in his chest. They could take his job, but not his dignity. The Denver air had a bite to it, even in May. Jack pulled his jacket tighter as he walked to his car in the employee lot, the faded white Altair sticker on his windshield feeling like a joke now. He slid into the driver's seat of his old Subaru Outback and just sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at the empty passenger seat. There was no one to call. His daughter Emily was finishing her last semester at college on the East Coast. His ex-wife wouldn't pick up, even if he tried. His closest friend had been the sky, and that had just been ripped away from him. The folder with his termination papers sat on the passenger seat like a weight. 6 months of severance. No pension yet. Not until he hit 55. Non-disparagement clause. That meant no speaking publicly, no talking to the media, no posting on forums, no warnings to other pilots. Silence in exchange for a payout. Jack started the engine and pulled onto Peña Boulevard. The drive to his modest townhouse in Aurora was quiet. the city lights blurring past as his thoughts churned. How do you go from being respected to irrelevant in one conversation? The next morning he woke early. Force of habit. 4:45 a.m. No flight today, no pre-check, no uniform to put on. He made coffee, black and bitter, and sat at the kitchen table flipping through the pages of the severance packet again. Buried in the legal jargon was the truth. He'd been discarded like old luggage. Too expensive, too experienced, too resistant to Sloane's new vision. He opened his laptop, logged into the Altair intranet one last time, and checked the internal bulletin. Boards. Dozens of new memos from Sloane's office. Staffing realignments, mandatory overtime, fewer layover hotels, revised rest schedules. Jack shook his head. That wasn't just greedy. That was dangerous. He clicked into his email. Hundreds of messages flooded his inbox. From Maria Reyes. I just heard. I'm furious. Call me? From F.O. Dan Harper. They're cleaning house. You were the first. From Anonymous. Jack, they're cutting corners on maintenance. We need to talk. That last one gave him pause. He clicked to open it. Jack, I work in ops. Can't use my name. Ever since Sloane took over, we've had pressure to skip certain checks. 3 Mels were cleared this week without full sign-off. I know you care, just don't go quietly. Jack sat back. The maintenance exception log, MEL, was sacred. It dictated which issues a plane could still fly with, under tightly defined conditions. If what this person said was true, it was more than cost-cutting, it was criminal negligence. He knew what he had to do. First he called Maria. You okay? She asked immediately. No hello. Not really, Jack said. You in Denver? Yep. Landed last night. Everyone's talking. Jack, people are pissed. You were the heart of this airline. He let out a tired breath. I need to talk to you. And a few others. Off the record. About what? About what's happening behind the scenes. The real story. I think Sloane's not just firing veterans. He's gambling with safety. There was a pause. Okay, Maria said. You name the place. I'll bring a few trusted folks. You're not the only one who's ready to blow the whistle. Jack closed his laptop and stared out the window. The sun had just begun to rise over the eastern plains. He might have been grounded, but something bigger was about to take off. They met at a diner on the outskirts of Aurora, the kind of place where pilots and mechanics went when they wanted. Good coffee, cheap eggs, and zero judgment. It was 7 a.m. on a Saturday, and the back corner booth had already been reserved by Maria, who was sipping her second cup when Jack walked in. Still can't believe they did this, she muttered, as he slid into the booth across from her. I can, Jack replied. That's what worries me. They didn't have to wait long. Within 10 minutes, 3 others joined them. First Officer Dan Harper, a calm and methodical flyer in his 30s. Flight Attendant Leah Simmons, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who'd been with Altair even longer than Jack, and Rick Carter, a senior maintenance lead who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Let's cut to it, Jack said once the waitress brought more coffee. Sloane's not just gutting people. He's gutting safety. And if we don't stop him, something bad is going to happen. Rick leaned in, voice low. It already almost has. He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his coat. It was a photocopy of a maintenance log entry. Last week, Flight 106 out of LAX had a faulty angle of attack sensor. That's a red flag for flight computers. Big one. Should have grounded the plane. Instead, we were told to override the flag, clear it, and let it fly. Jack's eyebrows knit. That's not just immoral. That's illegal. I know, Rick said. But I've got a kid in college, so does half my crew. We're being threatened. Quiet compliance or pink slips. Maria swore under her breath. Jack glanced around the diner, normal customers going, about their morning. The quiet hum of conversation, forks clinking on plates. No one here knew that the planes flying over them might not be airworthy. This is bigger than us now, Jack said. And it's not just about Sloane. The board must know they hired him for one reason, cut costs, they don't care how it happens. Leah leaned in. We can't strike, it'll look like a tantrum, and they'll just paint us as bitter old-timers. No, Jack said. We do this smart. By the book. FAA complaints, union pressure, whistleblower protections. I've already started talking to a lawyer who specializes in aviation safety law. Dan raised a brow. You're going to sue them? I'm going to expose them, Jack replied. Not just for firing me, for endangering passengers, for building a business, on a deck of cards. Silence hung in the air. Then Leah nodded. I'm in. Me too, said Rick. If I lose my job, I lose my job, but I'm not going to let a CEO with no flight hours write our safety protocol. Count me in, Dan added. But this has to be airtight. Sloan will come after us hard. Maria sipped her coffee and gave Jack a look. We better fly this plan flawlessly, Captain. Jack gave a faint smile. We will. Outside, a plane passed overhead. Jack didn't look up, this time. He didn't need to. He knew the sky like he knew his own heart. And right now, both were full of fire. By Monday morning, Jack's house had transformed into a command center. He cleared the dining table to make room for laptops, manila folders, printed maintenance records, and a corkboard littered with Post-its and FAA contact info. Maria brought. Over her iPad, Leah came armed with crew rosters and incident reports, and Rick arrived with a flash drive full of suspicious maintenance logs. Dan, as usual, brought coffee and a warning. Sloan started asking questions, he said as he set the cups down. Wants a list of who's aligned with company vision. The phrase being used is loyalty audits. Sounds like a dictatorship, Maria said. Jack gave a grim nod. Or a company in panic mode. They'd each taken roles. Jack would contact FAA investigators and aviation lawyers through private channels. Maria and Leah would organize crew testimonials and collect internal emails showing Sloan's disregard for safety concerns. Rick was compiling proof of falsified maintenance clearances. Dan, with his calm demeanor and access to operations, would be their man inside, still flying, but documenting everything. Every email was encrypted, every file backed up in multiple locations. If Sloan suspected even a hint of dissent, their plan would collapse. Midway through the day, Jack made a call to a former contact, now a whistleblower liaison at the FAA. Listen, I can't go on record yet, Jack said carefully, but I've got documented evidence of safety violations at Altair Airways. Compromised maintenance logs, coerced staff, pressure to override MELs. There was a pause. You have documentation? The agent asked. Yes, and witnesses, but they're scared. I'll need a sample, something that shows the pattern. Can you send it anonymously first? I can. After he hung up, Jack turned to the others. They're listening, but they'll need proof before they move. Rick plugged in his flash drive and opened a document. This one will do it. Flight 329. The fuel system warning that got cleared without repair. The pilot reported it in the logbook. The next day it's marked, checked and confirmed safe. But the part was never replaced. I know. We didn't even have it in stock that week. Jack read the report, his stomach turning. A faulty fuel system at cruising altitude could turn a routine flight into a disaster. This is what we send, he said. That night he uploaded the report via a secure channel to the FAA's whistleblower portal, along with a memo. More documents to come. We are current and former Altair employees with direct knowledge of ongoing safety violations encouraged by senior leadership. Please advise on next steps. We're willing to cooperate fully, under protection. He clicked send. Outside, the ow. Wind rustled through the trees, but inside Jack's house, the air was taut with tension. They had taken the first real step. Now there was no turning back. The fallout came faster than expected. By Wednesday morning, 2 maintenance supervisors were suspended pending review, and 3 flight routes had been abruptly canceled due to crew availability. Sloan's office put out a terse memo to all employees. Operational adjustments are a normal part of growth. Altair remains committed to safety and efficiency. The crew wasn't buying it. Maria called Jack during her layover in Dallas. People are whispering, Jack. Pilots are comparing notes. Even junior crew are noticing the weird vibe. Extra inspections, surprise audits, canceled flights. Sloan knows something's up. He doesn't know it's us, Jack said, but he knows he's being watched. That same day, the FAA replied to Jack's anonymous submission. The email was brief, but direct. We've reviewed the initial report. Please provide access to the internal logs and employee testimonies referenced. This case qualifies under federal whistleblower protections if participants come forward formally. Jack gathered the group that evening. Here's the decision. Point, he told them. We can stay anonymous and leak what we can, or we can file formal whistleblower affidavits. That means Sloan will eventually know who we are, but we'll be protected. Dan exhaled slowly. You sure they'll protect us? No guarantee, Jack said honestly, but hiding won't fix this. We do this clean by the book, and the FAA has to act, especially with this much evidence. Rick was the first to speak. I'll sign. I've had enough of this. Maria nodded. Same. If one of those planes goes down, I couldn't live with myself. Leah added, the new hires are terrified. They don't have our clout. If we don't do this, they'll keep getting bullied into silence. Jack looked at Dan. You don't have to. You're still flying. Dan looked back at him, steady as ever. I'm in. I'd rather go down doing the right thing than let Sloan crash this airline, literally. The following day, they submitted their formal whistleblower declarations, names, signatures, and full documentation of incidents. By Friday, the FAA launched a preliminary investigation into Altair Airways. And Carter Sloan? He responded with fury. Interoffice memo. From Carter Sloan, confidential. To all Altair operations staff. Effective immediately, all internal communication is subject to review. Unauthorized sharing of internal documents or procedures is a violation of corporate policy and will result in termination. Furthermore, all crew schedules are being adjusted to ensure maximum operational efficiency. Leadership will meet with all department heads to assess loyalty and role alignment. We will weather this distraction, together. Leah texted the group a screenshot of the memo, followed by one word. Witch hunt. Jack read the message and closed his phone. It had begun. Sloan was panicking, and panicking leaders made mistakes. All they had to do now was hold the line. The first major storm hit that weekend. Not in the sky, but inside Altair Airways headquarters. A leaked email from Carter Sloan to the board surfaced on an aviation industry blog. The email, clearly not meant for public eyes, outlined Sloan's frustration with union-driven obstructionists and his plan to rapidly replace legacy staff with more compliant and cost-efficient personnel. It also referenced a risk mitigation strategy in the event of FAA entanglement. The leak spread fast. Within hours, the blog post was being shared across pilot forums, aviation Reddit threads, and even made a brief mention on a late-night news segment. Sloan scrambled to call it fake, but insiders were already confirming its authenticity. Someone inside leaked it, Dan said over the phone. Not one of us. Maybe there are more people on our side than we realized. They're not. On our side, Jack replied. They're on the passenger's side, same as us. That Monday, FAA agents began quietly interviewing Altair employees. 2 mechanics were temporarily reassigned after confirming Rick's reports. Maria said 3 flight attendants on her crew had been pulled aside by the agency during layovers. The pressure was building, and Sloan, he was cracking. On Tuesday, he issued a surprise internal livestream. His tone was controlled, but his jaw was tight and his eyes kept darting off camera. There's been a lot of misinformation, Sloan said. Let me be clear. Altair Airways has never and will never compromise passenger safety. We remain committed to our protocols and people, and those trying to undermine our progress will be held accountable. The crew chat lit up within minutes. Maria. Translation. He's scared. Rick. I heard from a guy in dispatch. Sloan's office ordered a review of every pilot's personnel file from the last 5 years, looking for dirt. Leah. He's trying to intimidate us. Classic bully move. But intimidation wasn't working. Later that night, Jack received an encrypted message from a former Altair pilot, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. The pilot had been quietly forced into early retirement under Sloan's first wave of restructuring. His message was simple. I have audio recordings from board meetings. I was in the room. Sloan told them in plain words he'd fly planes with duct tape if it meant saving fuel. You want them? Jack stared at the screen. Yes, he typed. Send everything. By the next morning, Jack and the group had enough to hand, over to the FAA and to the press if it came to that. But they didn't need to. Because that day, for the first time, Sloan was summoned to Washington, D.C. for a federal inquiry. And back at Altair HQ, the entire flight crew at the Denver hub, over 100 pilots, flight attendants, and mechanics, filed into the main break room in their uniforms and refused to fly until safety policies were restored. A silent, unified protest. Jack watched from the sidewalk across the airport access road, a mix of pride and awe swelling in his chest. They hadn't just exposed the rot. They'd lit a fire. The headlines came fast. Altair Airways under FAA scrutiny after whistleblower bombshell. Pilots protest in Denver over safety concerns. CEO Carter Sloan called to testify before aviation oversight panel. News vans lined the streets outside Altair's headquarters, their antennas raised like steel spines. Reporters stalked terminal entrances, hoping to catch a quote from any uniformed crew member brave enough to speak. Most stayed silent. But the silence spoke volumes. Inside, the Altair executive boardroom had turned into a war room. Sloan, flanked by lawyers and flustered PR handlers, tried desperately to maintain control. The board, once dazzled by his rapid cost-cutting, had grown icy. They didn't like headlines. They hated congressional subpoenas. Jack watched the spectacle unfold from a distance. He and the others had chosen not to make public appearances, just yet. The FAA was handling the investigation now, and their attorney had advised them to stay quiet while the process moved forward. But behind the scenes, they were working harder than ever. Rick provided daily updates from friends still inside. Maintenance. Maria compiled every recorded memo, discrepancy report, and ignored complaint. Leah tracked crew member interviews and made sure the younger employees knew their rights. Dan, still flying, collected cockpit audio files and documented increasingly erratic scheduling changes, an obvious sign Sloan was scrambling to keep planes moving at any cost. And Jack? He was preparing the master report, a complete timeline of incidents, names redacted where necessary, hard evidence tied to every claim. He called it the Altair dossier. One night, after nearly 10 hours of writing, Jack leaned back in his chair and stared at the final page. It was damning and airtight. He saved it to 3 encrypted drives, locked them in a safe, and sent the draft to their FAA contact with the message, "Everything you need is here. Let us know when to testify." The reply came within an hour. Confirmed. You'll be called to speak before the Aviation Oversight Committee. Prepare for formal deposition. Full federal protection applies. It was real now. They were going to bring Sloan to the floor of Congress and show the world what he'd tried to hide. The next morning, Sloan's face appeared on live TV as he exited a federal building in D.C., his tie loosened, his lawyer stone-faced beside him. The reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Sloan, did you falsify safety reports? How do you respond to the whistleblower allegations? Are passengers in danger on Altair flights?" He said nothing, but his silence, like the crew's, said everything. Back in Denver, Jack stood on the tarmac just outside the perimeter fence. He watched as a jet, an Altair Airbus A321, lifted into the evening sky, still flying, but this time with real oversight watching. Jack's phone buzzed. A message from Maria. "We did it. Now let's finish it." Jack smiled, the runway lights reflecting in his eyes. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time in months the sky looked clear. The hearing room in Washington, D.C. was packed. Cameras, reporters, industry analysts, rows of politicians flanked by their aides. At the front of the chamber sat Carter Sloan, his posture stiff, his expression forced into something resembling humility. To his left sat Altair's general counsel. To his right, 2 FAA representatives. And across from him, at the witness table, Jack stood calmly, his hand raised for the oath. Maria, Rick, Dan, and Leah sat behind him in the gallery, silent and focused. This wasn't just a hearing, this was Judgment Day. The chairman of the IDIG Aviation Oversight Committee adjusted his glasses and began. Captain Jack Hollis, you're a 20-year veteran of commercial aviation. You served as lead pilot for Altair Airways until recently? Yes, sir, Jack replied. And you're one of several whistleblowers who submitted evidence that Altair Airways engaged in unsafe operational practices under the leadership of Mr. Sloan? Yes, sir. He could feel Sloan staring at him, but he didn't return the look. He focused on the panel, on the truth. What prompted you to come forward? The chairman asked. Jack inhaled. Because decisions were being made that valued cost over lives. Planes were flying with known issues. Maintenance reports were ignored or falsified. Crews were threatened into silence. I couldn't watch it happen any longer. He handed over a folder. The Altair dossier, officially entered into record. Over the next hour, the committee questioned Jack, then Maria, Rick, and Leah in turn. Each gave calm, factual testimony. Each presented evidence, logs, emails, and sworn affidavits. They painted a picture that was both precise and chilling, a culture of fear, manipulation, and corporate greed that had crept into every corner of Altair's operations. Then it was Sloan's turn. He straightened his tie and cleared his throat. With all due respect, he began, I categorically deny the allegations. We implemented aggressive restructuring, yes, but never at the expense of safety. These claims are from disgruntled employees resistant to change. A senator leaned forward. Mr. Sloan, one of your own board emails says, and I quote, if we duct tape a few wings to keep flying, so be it. Was that hyperbole or a directive? Sloan's face froze. I can't recall the context. It was recorded, the senator interrupted. We have the audio. From that moment, Sloan unraveled. His lawyer interjected repeatedly. The committee pressed harder, and by the end of the session, it was clear to everyone in the room. Sloan wasn't just guilty of negligence, he'd put thousands of lives at risk. 2 weeks later, the FAA grounded 27 Altair aircraft, pending full re-inspections. The Department of Transportation opened a formal investigation into the airline's leadership. Sloan was placed on administrative leave and, 3 days later, quietly resigned. Altair's board, eager to save face and restore trust, issued a statement. Effective immediately, Altair Airways will undergo complete operational reform. We thank the whistleblowers who came forward. They upheld the highest ideals of aviation, truth, courage, and accountability. Jack and his team received no money, no fame, just nods from strangers in uniform and quiet thank yous from those still flying. But that was enough. One morning, as Jack stood near the fence at Denver International, a young pilot walked by on his way to pre-flight check. He paused, recognizing him. Captain Hollis? The young man asked. Jack nodded. Thanks for what you did. You saved lives. Jack offered a quiet smile. Fly safe, son. The young pilot saluted with 2 fingers and disappeared into the terminal. Behind Jack, Maria joined him with 2 coffees in hand. It's over, she said. No, Jack replied. It's just beginning. They'll need new leadership, new policies, a new standard. Any chance, she said, offering him a smirk. You'll take that new leadership job if they offer? Jack took the coffee, thinking for a long moment. Only if I get to rebuild it from the ground up. Maria grinned. Then buckle up, Captain. Above them, A jet cut across the morning sky. Level, steady, safe. Exactly as it should be. 6 months later, the terminal at Denver International had a new buzz. Altair Airways had a new CEO, a former military pilot turned safety advocate. The company rebranded with a new motto: "Safety is the destination." Maintenance hangars were upgraded, crew feedback protocols were overhauled, and for the first time in years, pilots had a seat at the executive table. Jack didn't take the CEO role. He turned it down. But he did return as the newly appointed Director of Flight Safety and Culture. Maria became head of cabin training. Rick consulted on maintenance reform. Leah helped launch a mentorship program for new flight attendants. Dan, ever steady, kept flying but also began giving safety talks at flight schools. Their crew, once scattered and silenced, now led from the front. One bright spring morning, Jack sat in his new office overlooking the runways. A framed copy of the FAA whistleblower citation hung on the wall, next to a worn photo of him and his original flight crew from 15 years ago. There was a knock at the door. A young woman in uniform peeked in, nervous but excited. "Sir, I just got assigned to my first rotation. I read your testimony. I just wanted to say, you made me proud to join this airline." Jack stood, offering a warm smile. "Then let's make sure you stay proud." As she left, Jack looked out the window. A jet took off gracefully, wheels folding up into the belly of the aircraft as it climbed into a clear blue sky. He sipped his coffee and nodded to himself. There were still flights to fly, still people to protect, still truth to stand for. And after everything, they were just getting started. The end.